world feels a bit toxic and blah these days, doesn't it? The same old people coming up with the same old solutions for big problems that still don't work. We need to change the game. Well, welcome to Women Advancing. Join me, host Kate Byrne, in this dynamic bi-weekly podcast, bringing together female founders, funders, and thought leaders. Listen to the people driving change, how they got there, how you can help, and yep, how you might just be the next one to advance. Proof that all ships rise with women at the helm. That's what happens when Women Advance with Kate Byrne. Hey everyone, it's me, Kate Byrne, your host. There's been so much conversation over the education system and how broke it is, and what are we going to do about the future of learning? So I ask, what does it look when you build the future of learning, not from an ivory tower, but as a young woman, and I'm going to say a young woman of color, who's determined to democratize access to some of the most complex knowledge on earth, quantum computing? Well, meet Akshita Tiwari, who's the co-founder of qMe and the Charlottesville Business Innovation Counselor's Student Entrepreneur of the Year. What's qMe? It's a platform reimagining how we engage with STEM and quantum learning and watching its impact on all systems that we know, be it finance, climate, and more. In this episode of Women Advancing, Akshita is going to share what it means to be a young founder who's navigating innovation, impact, and identity all at once. We talk about the leap from, can you imagine, going from student to CEO and being taken seriously when you're looking for funding, really making quantum concepts feel human, and why rethinking education might be one of the boldest acts of leadership there is. I seriously enjoy this. Listen in. Stay to the end, but I guarantee you, you will feel so much better. There's just a level of positivity and passion that transcends, as it were. So enjoy and look forward to seeing you. Akshita Tiwari, co-founder of qMe. Welcome to the world of Women Advancing. We are so fortunate, everyone who's listening, to hear from, at this point, who will be the youngest founder that we are speaking to this season. So Akshita, welcome.
I am incredibly honored to be here. I'm so excited. Thank you so much, Kate, for having me. I can't wait.
My pleasure. So before we jump into qMe, which is going to blow pretty much everybody's mind away, let's start at the very beginning and let's hear about you. Like, give us a little bit of the background and your journey and how you kind of ended up doing all of this.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So growing up, for high school, I went to the STEM magnet high school. And so when you go to these places, the first thing they kind of instill in you is research. They want you to start research and keep that going over 4 years, right? And so I go and I'm a confused ninth grader and I'm like, okay, what do I want to do research in? Absolutely no clue. And so my mentor at the time, he goes, okay, why don't you try something called quantum computing? Hear that? And I'm like, no way. It sounds insane, complicated, just too much for me. I had no coding experience.
Right.
So I'm there and I'm like, okay, fine. You know what? If you're really insisting, I'll try out this one class, right? So I try out the class, and after I take the class, I realize that this field, it sounds really theoretical, and you can make it theoretical if you'd like, but it has so many applications. Our science, we can use it as a tool to apply to healthcare, to finance, to law, to any of these fields. And so that kind of caught my mind. I'm like, okay, so now we have something that I thought was really computer science, and it is computer science, but it's so applicable. And so that's kind of where my journey started. And from there, for the next 4 years, I was really, really involved, and to this day still am, in my own quantum research. I mainly worked in healthcare, so that was kind of my intersection between quantum computing and healthcare. And so growing up in these 4 years, I would attend these conferences, talk to my family every single day at the dinner table. And I'm bringing this up and I'm like, guys, I learned about this today. And they're like, it's too complicated. And I'm like, what? My whole family is full of CS experts compared to me. I'm just starting out. And I'm like, what do you mean this is too complicated? And so that's kind of where everything started for me. Because I know that I still have balance in my life. I do all the things I love to do. And I still am learning this complicated science. Why can't my family think that? Why can't my friends think that? Everyone's coming up to me. They're like, oh, you should pick something easier. But why? And so that's my journey. And that's where I started. And that's where I realized that it's not really about the content. It's about that fear that we all have that this is never for me. And I once had that fear when I started out. And so that's kind of where my journey launched. And that's where I launched qMe, because me and my best friend were like, okay, let's do something. And so we co-founded qMe together to get rid of that stigma that quantum computing is just so complicated, because there's so much unused potential amongst people that we know. So that's kind of my journey. I just finished my first year at UVA studying computer science and entrepreneurship. I love to talk a lot. So I talk a lot about my journey in quantum, and especially as a woman navigating both STEM and entrepreneurship. Both of them have their own barriers and their own obstacles. And so I'm really just still getting my footing down and learning things and launching startups, but I just love what I do.
It's infectious. So question for you, will you do me a favor and will you take just a quick beat and kind of unpack a little bit for listeners the whole notion of quantum computing? Interestingly, just so you know, one of the folks who I've had the honor of actually interviewing is this woman, Donna Zohar, who does quantum. It's essentially, she does quantum leadership. So what it is it's quantum mechanics applied to leadership theory. So it's kind of interesting. I'm just sitting here thinking it would be great to have the two of you have a conversation together. But anyway, share with people, when they hear quantum computing, what does that mean?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great question. And to kind of simplify it down, the whole essence of quantum is that we have our regular computers. We call them classical computers. And so the problem is, for certain problems, classical computers can do, quantum computers can do better. They can do it with something called a higher computing power. And that sounds a lot, but essentially what the concept is that we can apply the rules of quantum physics, which is not our regular physics, and put it into quantum computing. And that's what we can use to have faster solutions and more effective solutions. So this could mean the difference in accuracy, right? Or it could just mean solving the same problem that would have taken otherwise years to solve in days or minutes. And so the whole concept of it is just sort of giving us a look into our future in tech development and seeing where problems who we otherwise thought would be impossible to solve. And that really is just an interesting thing to play around with.
Yeah. I mean, in so many ways, literally what it really does is it superpowers your ability and abilities. And it does so much of the computing so much more quickly so that you can you can either find an error faster, and so you don't go down that path, or build upon all of this. So what problem were you trying to solve when you and your friend co-founded qMe? And then make sure that you share with us exactly what qMe is.
Yeah, absolutely. So qMe is the venture that my best friend Aditya Sangar and I co-founded. And essentially what we do is we work to introduce quantum computing education at early ages. So we essentially make this content more accessible to anybody, regardless of background, regardless of previous experience, and things like that. And so our problem that we were trying to solve was just something that we both have faced. Coming into the field at first, we thought that there was no place for us. We thought that this was not going to be something that stayed with us. We thought the research was too complicated. And so our big mission is just to get rid of that mindset. And so what we do is we started off by teaching middle school students. We expanded to elementary school students. We've also expanded to university students in India. And the whole social good aspect of us as well is that we wanted to dedicate this to a cause that we care about. And I feel a lot of the times I see representation and I see exposure to the mainstream charity organizations such as Red Cross, for example, but I don't see something that is much more, definitely the same level of importance, but not as much exposure is given.
Right.
And so for me, a problem that I've seen personally as someone coming from an Indian background is that many people in India, especially women, are unable to pursue not even quantum computing, but STEM fields because of societal barriers or financial barriers. And I think it's just a cultural thing that we can work to change despite being across the world. And so what we do is we paired up with an orphanage that supports women and we fund their STEM education. And so over the years, we picked our charitable initiatives that we personally either relate to or we feel like don't get enough attention from mainstream media. And that's also part of what qMe does. And I feel like it's not talked about as much, but I think that a core of what we do and what's kept us motivated is that gratification that comes from that as well.
It excites me because social entrepreneurships, it used to be people would think you can't build something with it's either purpose or it's profit.
Right.
But there's absolutely no way you can have both. And the truth of the matter is there has now been so much research that shows, yes, you can. And that the social entrepreneurship efforts and entities often have longer term, better, more sustainable, one impact for sure, but overall performance, because it just makes sense. If you're taking care of the planet, that's going to take care of your customer, and then that will help the people buy your product, which then leads to your profit. I've never understood why people don't get that.
And I think that's something also for me initially when I started out. I think that society also has that kind of notion that you can only build a business for X amount of profit or for this sort of reason. I didn't know much about social entrepreneurship before I started, and I accidentally kind of did it. But I think that we also need to talk more about what does that kind of look like? Especially for young founders, especially for women, what does that look like? What does it mean to make an impact? And you want to be at the forefront of your impact. I want to see the people that I'm helping, the industries that I'm helping. And I think people just out of either laziness or lack of information are unable to do it. And I find that so, as you said, I just find it so crazy. How do you not understand that?
Yeah. Well, and you know what it is? I think because for far too long, whenever anyone's looked to try and do something new, the very first question we ask is, we talk about what could go wrong as opposed to what could go right. Because really, you only know what you know. And so that's super safe. And I'm not saying you have to be a crazy risk taker, but it could be just beyond you, something so amazing that could make all the difference in the world. But you have to take a step away and be willing to expand. So speaking of expansion, what was the moment you knew this idea had legs? Was there like a milestone?
Yeah, I think there was two kind of moments that we thought, okay, this is something that's lifelong. It stays with us our whole lives. When we first started, we were sitting in Panera Bread. We were like, okay, we just want to do something. And so we're making calls. We're trying to pitch to people in our area. And we got so much love and so much appreciation. But many people told us, they were like, well, what are you doing? Like, this doesn't make any sense. It's quite a foreign concept. It's not something that has been done before in major scales. So when we first started, we had expected maybe 5 students, 10 students, 15 max. And we had gotten 80 signups.
Whoa.
80 signups in our first pilot program with no experience at all. That was just based on students who wanted to learn. We didn't even have the platform. We didn't build it yet, but people just wanted to learn. Middle school students wanted to learn. And so that was mind-blowing to us. Like, I remember when I opened up that sign up and I see this many, I'm shocked. I was, oh my God, that's insane. And so that was our first moment. But I think there we had that kind of doubt that was like, okay, will we be able to sustain this? It's one thing to get this many students, but we've never taught this before. We don't know what exactly is going on. But I remember from the classes that I had taken, we had always had MIT professors or PhD students teach us. And that's insane. That's amazing. But I never felt I had education at my level. And so we were like, you know what? Let's start where we wish we had started. And I think that's something we've kept with qMe forever. And that's kind of the moment we knew that this idea was going somewhere. Because I remember there was this one particular moment, we were hosting a summer camp and a parent had signed up their child and the child was in first grade. And this is before we started teaching elementary school. And so I'm like stressing out all these middle school students and then there's a first grader. What are we going to do with them? And so then we realized, we were like, okay, let's try something out. Instead of talking about quantum computing, which will obviously not mean anything to this person, let's observe. Let's take a step back as educators and see what does he enjoy. And so during the breaks, it would be YouTube breaks, and he would watch astronomy videos, planets that he liked to.
Oh, yeah, of course.
So we would be like, okay, he likes planets. How about we try using his passion and then incorporate quantum computing into it? So I talked to him and I was like, okay, listen, I have a tool for you that can make these planets more interesting. And so that's kind of where I came up with the concept of using passion as a tool to ignite curiosity in these students. And I think that's something we believe in at the core. Because even for me, if I didn't have the notion that, okay, healthcare is applicable in quantum computing, I wouldn't care about it. I want to know what I can do for and by the end of the week, this first grade student wrote a blog article on quantum computing and astronomy. And I thought, that's insane. That's crazy. So that was the idea. That was the day that I knew. I was like, this is going to stay with me.
This is the thing.
Absolutely. And I love doing it. I love every minute of it. And I just think there is nothing better in this world to dedicate my Saturday mornings to. I love it.
Amazing. And I think it's really interesting. And I think you hit the nail on the head when I think you're right. The difference is learning from peers. It's peer-to-peer learning.
Absolutely.
So it's so much more accessible, right? Much less intimidating. And you just automatically feel, well, okay, these guys will get me. They'll understand what I'm up against, what I'm doing, where I am, where my head's at, all sorts of things. So I think that's incredibly astute. Good on you for that. But so one thing you mentioned and you brought up a little bit was, there are barriers, right? Every founder has them. As a woman innovating in both STEM and entrepreneurship, what are some of the ones you faced and how have you navigated them? And I want to make this statement. It's hard for anyone of any expertise level, any age, any experience, but to do what you've done, and obviously you're onto something, I would think I would hope garner a lot of excitement from some, but there's always competition.
I think just starting off with both STEM and entrepreneurship over the years, going to a very STEM-focused magnet high school, that's one environment, and then coming to an entrepreneurship environment, those are two different sets of barriers that I feel. And so I think for STEM, the biggest thing for me was just access. At the time when I was even pursuing this research, despite being at a magnet high school, I was the only woman even pursuing it to begin with. And so when you're the only person doing something, especially in the field of STEM, when it's a very technical field, you will always face some sort of criticism, both external and internal, because there's no access. I feel like if I had known, or if it was a common thing for women to be in quantum computing and do all these things, I would have been, okay, nothing out of the norm, whatever. But I remember people, like my peers, would come up to me and be like, why would you pick this when you can pick something easier? When you can do something that requires 5 less hours per week, why choose this? And so I sat myself down so many times and I was like, am I doing the right thing by even pursuing it? Because A, it's such a new field, but B, even beyond that, I'm the only person doing something that people don't really know about or they're not doing. And so when you're all following that bandwagon, there is definitely a lot of doubt. And I think the biggest barrier is that internal doubt. Because if I believe that I can do it, then that opens up so many new doors for me. But the problem is the way society has also conditioned us and the way that things are for women, it's difficult to kind of invoke that self-belief and keep it going. For me, my family, I needed them every single day. I think I would come to them with something and be like, no, you're doing exactly what you need to do. You need to have a support system. And I feel like a major barrier for me in STEM was having that sort of access. Because for me, I'm someone who loves to talk. I have a very social side to me. And typically in STEM, people think that the most successful people are those who are just kind of able to like put their head down or robotic and just,
that's really nice. Introverted. Yeah.
Exactly. And so growing up, I also felt that. And I hate saying it, but it's true. That's just kind of the stereotype of the STEM world. And so for me, someone like me, for example, I was in my junior year, I was selected to go to this conference at MIT, and it was their undergraduate research tech conference. And so I go there and I love to talk and I love to do those things, but when you're placed in such an exclusive STEM environment, it becomes so much harder to not kind of tone down your personality, because so many people have told me, oh, well, you're in STEM, you should act this certain way. Or if you want to be successful, look at this scientist, or they've acted that way. So I think just that sort of access and knowing deep down that I shouldn't have to tone down my personality, I should just go at it the way that I am. I can also be the way that I am and have this very vibrant personality and then also be very technically sound. You can do both. And I think that is something that is still not understood. Even at the conference, I had presented my presentation and my research, and I had wore this very vibrant pink blazer. And so I was the only person wearing that. And people were coming up to me and asking me, okay, where did you get that, this, that? But in that moment, there was definitely a moment of self-doubt of, oh, is that what I was supposed to do? Is that something I should have done? And so I think over the years, that's something for STEM that's really, really that I vouch for. I tell all the girls that I teach, you need to believe in yourself, especially where there is definitely not enough equity. We need to be the ones to, push ourselves up there and be like, we can. And then for entrepreneurship, I feel it's actually the opposite problem. It's about the storytelling, and it's about making sure that you advocate for yourself before you even have a vision. There's been so many times for my startup, I don't even have a full app yet, but I need to go and convince people that know what I'm doing. And I think for entrepreneurship, the biggest barrier, especially with that sort of perception-based field, it's really about that first impression or that first kind of chat that you have with someone. So I think just getting over that nervousness and being like, okay, I'm going to go into this room. I'm the youngest person. I'm a woman of color. I'm still going to talk to people. I'm going to go out there and throw myself out there. So I think that's kind of the barriers that I've faced.
Yeah, because that's what I was going to ask. And it's really interesting. I went to an event last night. It was at the Motion Picture Association, and it was for the screening of the movie Lily about Lily Ledbetter, who was the person who, helped create and cause and had a bill named after her regarding fair pay. And I met an astrophysicist and extraordinary personality, bright, bubbly, very stylish, all the things you would not at all have thought. And she said exactly this. She said, this is me, but I'm also damn good at building rocket ships. So what are you going to do with that? Which it's terrific. So here's where I'm going with this. Do you think, or have you ever found that being underestimated has actually worked in your favor? Or are you just so tired of that narrative entirely?
I think that there's two sides of me that will answer this question. For the first, it's me now looking retrospectively at my journey so far. And I can say that being underestimated has definitely worked in my favor. I think people just assume that your potential is so much less than it actually is, or that you are so much less capable than you are. So then when you think that, and I've known that because people have even said it to my face, right? Then it kind of, yes, you're upset at first, but it creates this sort of fire or motivation in you to do something about it. And to be, okay, you know what, you think that, that's good. Think that, because I'm going to prove that wrong to the point where age isn't even in the question. Then it's not about how old are you? What do you look like? What do you do? It's just about, wow, look at her work. And so I think so many times with the right support, I've felt, you know what, I'm going to take this and turn it into success for myself. And to have the hope that younger people or the next upcoming generations don't have to face that, because I don't think it's right. I don't think, despite it working in my favor, I never think that it's something that I would wish upon anyone or want for myself. But I also feel like as much as that stands, I think that there's been times where I have felt the loneliness or have felt upset, because at the end of the day, it is still someone attacking how you are or personally what they believe you can do. And I believe the only person who can define what I can do should be me.
True. I completely agree. And I think it's incredibly short-sighted, frankly.
Absolutely.
But so how has your leadership evolved, from when you very first started qMe to now? Have you had to unlearn anything?
Yeah, I think typically before I started, I used to think that entrepreneurship is a very not emotional journey. I used to think that, especially coming from a very strong STEM background, in STEM, we're always taught to be data-driven, neutral, don't really think about the emotions or things like that. And so I think that was sort of already intrinsically in me. But I think as I've done qMe and as I've led qMe through everything, I've realized that the best leader isn't the one who just is able to get all the check boxes, but is able to lead with care and with empathy. And that's not something I intentionally figured out, but as I would teach these students, I realized that the reason why this kept going isn't because the business side of it was fun. Of course it was fun, but more than that, the students coming up to me and saying, because of you, I took my first quantum computing class. Now I'm pursuing research. Now I'm pursuing an internship. Now I'm even going abroad to study, right? All these things, especially when it comes from women who are not able to have the same privileges that I do, being here with this education system, it just sets something in your brain. It rewires me to think, wow, the things that I'm doing is helping somebody out there. And I think that's such an important thing, because leaders and entrepreneurs, especially in media, is shown to be, oh, wow, they're so tough and strong-minded. You can be strong-minded and tough and still be incredibly emotional. I think the best entrepreneurs lead with emotion. They are very open about their vulnerabilities, what has gone right, what has gone wrong. And I think it's something like qMe, where it is all about the mindset. The students need to be approached with care. I've had so many brilliant educators who haven't understood that emotional human side of me. And I think that is what makes the difference between a good education and a bad education.
And the thing that makes me laugh a little bit is there's so many people who are so worried about AI, being inhumane. And there's so many humans who are incredibly inhumane.
Exactly.
So what's a belief in your mind about learning or intelligent that you think we urgently need to kind of switch around and reframe?
I think something major that I've always thought about is that intelligence can come in many different forms. I think I always used to think, okay, the more technical people or intelligence is seen in IQ or things like that, right? And not that that doesn't contribute to it, but there are so many other formats of intelligence. For example, design intelligence, right? I could be someone who designs an algorithm and somebody else is able to put it in a format usable by the common people. I think that is important because you want to be at the intersection of both. I can know quantum computing. I can be learning quantum computing. If I can't put it into an audio or visual format that students, middle schoolers, elementary schoolers can understand, then I don't consider my job done.
Well, the thing is, that reminds me of the quote about simplicity is the greatest form of elegance. And it's less is always more. It just is. It's so clean. Well, so with that in mind, as we get more and more and deeper into quantum learning, is there an area in particular or a societal ill, if you will, that you see it having the greatest impact or the biggest? Is it education, climate, health, something else, or yes, all?
Yes, all, but I think in particular, if I had to highlight a few, I would say first and foremost in healthcare. My specific research was about healthcare. And so especially something called quantum machine learning, it's kind of really different to our regular machine learning because it can take data, hospital data, that is really hard to kind of work with and work with it. And so that's kind of just really a simple explanation, but the whole thing is just so inspiring because if we can, for example, predict life expectancy for someone with lung cancer, which is something that I worked on, or just even prove that quantum computing can be applied in these cancer fields or disease fields, I think that is something groundbreaking. And I think the more we educate younger people, we are going to have solutions for these problems that we could have never seen before. And I think that leads back to education as well. I think quantum computing is going to reshape how we think of education because typically, even now, when teaching artificial intelligence or quantum, we have a little bit of a hesitance. We're like, okay, I don't know if this is going to work. When we start off, we're like, okay, I don't know if this is going to go anywhere. In the next 10, 20, 30 years, I want that notion to be completely gone because quantum computing education to an elementary schooler, to a first grader, is going to show everybody that, again, education has no age. It is very, very much determined by how we are approaching.
Perfect segue into a question that is burning away within me. So with you and all that you've lived and done and the whole notion of bringing things to where people can, access it, you could redesign the entire learning system from scratch. What would it look like?
I think it would have a couple different pieces to it, a couple different moving parts. First of all, normalizing the idea that education is a two-way street. I used to, growing up, think that, okay, the teacher knows all and I know nothing, and it is a one-way sort of transfer. But what I've realized is that, especially being an educator myself, I'm only 18 years old. I have so much more to learn, but I'm still learning from the students who are 8 years old and 9 years old. So I think that kind of fluid, interconnected kind of system is what we need. And just building on top of that, I think as a whole, the world is very interdisciplinary. I think we sometimes think that, okay, you can only be in the arts or you can only be in STEM. You can't really do everything all at once. So again, just kind of breaking that down and having those classes or having that education where the students are creators. And I think STEM especially, STEM is all about creation, but I think it's about storytelling as well. I think when I have my students learn quantum computing, the first thing I make them do is go teach others by writing their own blog article. So you are learning how to write, you're learning how to communicate, and then you're learning to teach others. Because when you teach others, your own information gets even stronger. So if I had to redefine the learning system, I would just say that as education gives us confidence, we also need to know that we need to have the communication to be able to say what we've learned and to really, really just hone in on what exactly matters and what we're learning and kind of combine all those fields together.
Exactly. And, it's so funny because it reminds me of so often the, age-old adage of, oh, knowledge is power, always when it's shared. Otherwise, great, on you. It makes you whatever, but absolutely must be carrying a salt shaker. So what's a piece of advice you're so glad let me put it this way. What's a piece of advice that you've gotten and you're glad you said and you've ignored?
I think be more realistic. I've gotten that one a lot. I still get this to this day. It's just that, this is a dream that everybody has, or this is something everybody wants to do. Just don't keep your hopes high. I think the only thing keeping me going is keeping my hopes high. I would any day take the disappointment of not reaching a goal rather than not even having the goal in the first place. So I think I'm just happy to just be able to be, okay, you know what? I am not realistic and I'm proud of it. I do think my life is sunshine and rainbows, and that's fine. You can take that.
There's a whole thing too, right? It's if we're all truly, in fact, connected, there's magnetic frequency. So frequency to frequency, you're going to magnetize to you that which you are at the same level of. And high, happy, positive is way higher than negative, right? So you bring to you what you put out there. It's just, that is like a universal law.
Absolutely. And I think it's so strong. I really think it matters.
And I'm just going to say, whoever you people are, shame on swooping and pooping. We usually use the term swoop and poop for, during a brainstorming session when someone's going off and all the things it could be, and somebody goes, they kind of Eeyore it. And I think, as the kids used to say, don't yuck on my yum. But it's really, really true. And my daughters right now, if you're listening, are rolling their eyes going, oh my God, Mom, shut up.
I haven't heard that one in a couple of times.
I know. That's me thinking I'm so on the pulse. But knowing what you know now, what advice would you give your younger self?
I think I would probably just tell my younger self to tune out everything around me and just really sit down, stay in the moment. I think a lot of the times, especially as someone who is an early founder and who really wants to, get away from this idea that, oh, this is not going to go anywhere. You need to redefine what you're doing. Entrepreneurship, you're too young, all these things. I think as somebody who was navigating that space, a lot of the times I always kept thinking, next step. I need to do this. I need to do that. If I have this opportunity, then the next one has to be something better so that I kind of stay on the radar of people. But I think over time, what I realized is that you can also plan for the next steps, but also savor the moment and be like, okay, you know what? In this moment, I'm so proud of everything that I've done. I'm so proud that I found something that I'm passionate about. And I'm in a field that it's not really that easy to succeed in. And I am trying my best. And I think a lot of people, a lot of women especially, need to hear that what you're doing on a day-to-day basis is already insane. And it's already something for anybody to be inspired by. And I think just telling myself that over and over again and waking up and thinking, okay, there is nothing wrong with the path that you're on. I think that's the only advice.
Well, you've already helped so many people who are listening right now with that piece of advice. And I think there's so many people who, they've given up or they've been sort of bruised from trying so hard and, to your point, facing so much of the bias that has existed. And really, at the end of the day, it's like, believe.
Absolutely. And I think it also comes from the network that you have. And that's why I believe so heavily in mentorship, and even just mentorship, whether that comes through your family or that comes through your friends. I think you need to create a network of people who, even when you don't believe in yourself and you're like, okay, I quit, I can't do this anymore, which I've said so many times. My parents, my brother have always been like, no, if I know anybody who can do it, you can. I think that inspiration, that hope, even when you don't have the validation to support it, that's what takes you to eventually reach the benchmarks that you want to.
So true. And you're like, I got this. And I really think I do. Oh my God.
Give it another try. Yeah, just to try one more time.
Well, and what's the harm?
Exactly.
Akshita, thank you so much for just sharing your energy, your positivity, but more your intelligence, your smarts, your grace, your please. I can tell you right now, this is probably, people will bookmark this because it's such a healing message. And it gives such inspiration when, in a world when people are really kind of feeling a little uncertain and not quite sure, is it going to all work out? And is AI or quantum friend or foe? It is. And it can be a friend. It can also be a foe, but it depends on you and what you do with it. So at the end, you always have advocacy. But thank you. And I look forward to continuing the conversation.
Thank you so much, Kate.
Well, if you are not inspired and energized by my conversation with Akshita, you better check and make sure you haven't died. She is the Charlottesville Business Innovation Council's Student Entrepreneur of the Year, and it's no surprise why. When you hear and when you see, and I'm going to use the other verb, feel, everything that makes Akshita who she is, it makes you so excited for the future. At least it does me. So my takeaways. One is in a way, it's really more for those of us who are dealing with younger generations. And the notion of where we have a tendency to swoop and poop, as it were, or to kind of, say, oh my gosh, don't get your hopes up. I don't know if some of our realism is necessarily as helpful. And is it really for us? Or is it making us feel less guilty because we haven't done as well or haven't achieved certain goals? I think we ought to really focus on lifting up in a realistic way. Of course, you've heard through the comments, it makes a big difference. 2, got to make STEM more accessible. And things like quantum, which is truly, that's what's going to be sort of de rigueur. I just know it is. And the positive impact that can have is immeasurable. So rather than being afraid of it and not sort of shutting down and not learning it, be curious, light touch. And as Akshita said, what's the worst thing? You take a misstep and then you go back and you try again. So I really loved that piece as well. And then in terms of just intelligence in general, there's so many types of intelligence. And I know on the outset that seems like such a trite comment, but I think we forget that. I really do. And I think that when we are working with younger generations, with students, please don't underestimate. As a person who has my entire life been underestimated simply because I'm effusive, I can be funny, I am expressive, have always been taken for someone who's a little bit less than, a little bit stupid. And believe me, au contraire, mon frère. So be sure to just celebrate the differences in each other and our intelligences. And then let's just see what a little curiosity can help us lead to. So with that, I'll leave you and have an amazing, amazing rest of your day and look forward to continuing the conversation with I'm Not Going to Tell Who.
Thanks for listening. May this episode inspire you to move forward. Be sure to go to iTunes, Spotify, katebyrne.co, that's KATEBYRNE.co, or wherever you listen to your podcasts and listen to even more episodes. Here's to strong women. May we know them, may we be them, may we raise them. And be sure to meet them on the next Women Advancing. Ta till next time.